Yo, welcome to this reaction video. I'm back from the match. We won. I scored 4 goals, but it's a little bit too late to stream now, so I thought why not react to a oompaville video that I will watch anyways. We have reacted to 3 of them already, so this will be the 4th one. Leave a like for oompaville. The bro is stretching his neck out for us. Leave a like for this video, check out my main channel, and let's enjoy this reaction together, guys. Maybe a World 1 up or something.
There is a conspiracy theory from the early 20th century that basically says three of the richest men in America were killed in one night by a man named JP Morgan for opposing a system that would give private...
By the way, Tesla is also on the list, supposedly.
Private banks essentially unlimited control without any representation among the population. Unlimited control over those people to just build wealth, start wars, and do whatever they want. Part of that is a conspiracy theory. The other part's real, that like the last 90% of that is legit. But the first little nugget is a little wild, and that's what we're gonna be talking about in today's video.
He's being careful, like, come on. How many conspiracies already proved right? It's more than only 10%, right?
The grand conspiracy, and that is that we are all essentially slaves, and there's not a lot we can do about it.
Wait, did he even say 10%?
Banks essentially unlimited
control before I say something bad
without any representation among the population. Unlimited control over those people to just build wealth, start wars, and do whatever they want. Part of that is a conspiracy theory. The other part's real, that like the last 90% of that is legit. But the first little nugget is a little wild.
Okay,
that's what we're going to be talking about in today's video.
Is
the grand conspiracy.
My bad.
That is that we are all essentially slaves, and there's not a lot we can do about it.
Well, the theory that we are slaves, I heard first with the Anunnakis, guys. The Anunnakis came to the Earth and made us their gold slaves so we can secure the atmosphere, right?
John Jacob Astor, Benjamin Guggenheim, and Isidor Straus were 3 of the richest men in America.
Actually, I already like it to do it offline because, like, when I'm live, I don't have like all the ideas right in my head. Here, maybe when I get something in my head, I can pause and then redo it. But for now, it's all live, guys. 2 minutes live now, or 3.
In the early 20th century, they had a combined net
some beer
worth
as well,
of
so
$15
maybe I'm a little
billion
bit more talkative
in
because of
2026
that.
months. All 3 of those men drowned the same night on April 15th, 1912, aboard the Titanic. Who owned the Titanic? Was it God? No, but close.
Wait. Let me ask JP Morgan.
It was JP Morgan. JP Morgan owned White Star Line through a holding company called International Mercantile Marine, which is a shipping trust he put together in 1902 by pulling 6 Atlantic steamship operations under one board. This made him a sort of Elon Musk of his time, but instead of spaceships with Elon, it's the Titanic, steamboat. 3 of the richest men
Does he want to say that Elon has some shit on his shoes?
In the country bought tickets on the maiden voyage. Astor, Guggenheim, Straus. Morgan conveniently canceled his ticket. He was supposed to go.
Well, their hairs were licked as fuck.
The richest men in the country bought tickets on the maiden voyage. Astor, Guggenheim, Straus. Morgan conveniently canceled his ticket. He was supposed to go. Suite B-52 never had a passenger, and the ship, boom, hit a f***ing iceberg on April 15th, 1912, and all 3 of those men drowned, among others. And then 20 months later, the Federal Reserve Act is signed into law. Now, these things may or may not be connected, okay? Now, there are sources that...
Wait, Titanic was pre-First and Second World War?
Now, these things may or may not be connected.
I didn't know that.
Now, there are sources that put those facts in order and that tell you that 3 rich men were killed because they opposed the Fed, and Morgan got off the boat because Morgan was the one who arranged it. It is a clean story, and on paper it makes sense because of the motivation, follow the money. But there is a documented record that is, I would say, as conspiratorial and insane, but it's real, and it doesn't match the conspiracy. We're going to talk about both in this video, and specifically what the Fed is, what the fractional banking is, and how people like this turtle And also this
I know this turtle.
fractional
his
banking
name?
is, and how people like this turtle
No idea who he's actually talking about, guys. Oh, what's the turtle? I know. I saw
and
it.
also this child sex trafficker got all their money, and how the rich get richer,
pedophile.
and why that's a thing that you've been hearing your entire life, but you really don't understand why.
It's because money, interest compounds. Interest, it's a natural force. It's a natural force of nature, and it compounds.
Yeah, but like also, there's a system that was built literally by these people. I didn't realize, guys.
By these pedophiles.
Just kidding, I did realize. Let's start with Isidore Straus. He was a co-owner of Macy's, a former Democratic congressman from New York, and a banker-class reformer who had spent years arguing publicly for a central bank. On October 16th, 1911, 6 months before the Titanic sailed, Straus wrote a letter to the New York Times endorsing the Aldrich Plan by name. That is the plan written on Jekyll Island the previous November that would become the Federal Reserve Act. So Straus argued the country needed exactly the kind of elastic currency reserve system that Aldrich was proposing, and that the plan deserved business community support. Straus was not a Fed opponent. He was a supporter of the Fed on the public record in the months before he died. So that's where the conspiracy sort of differs from the public record. Astor was on record favoring a reform of banking. Guggenheim's position on the Fed is more of a blank page. The Titanic conspiracy to hold up needs those three men to be opponents of the Fed, and one of them publicly campaigned for it. So those three people dying is probably just a coincidence, but it doesn't change the fact that this is all real. You don't have to clandestine murder people aboard a big stupid ship to be able to create a system that's horrible. They've been fighting wars for a long time because of bank and stuff. I mean, the Emancipation Proclamation guy got killed because of banks. The Civil War.
That is a little bit confusing.
Banks. So all that being said, the coincidence is not nothing. Morgan did own the ship through IMM, and he did.
So, to review that, he's talking now about those three people that died on the ship. Morgan was the big brain, but he talked about the non-Harriet guy, that he was a supporter of the Feds, but he was also on the ship and died, so it's a little bit contradictional with the conspiracy, right?
Did have a dedicated suite held for him that he canceled before sailing, and then after it sailed, he died 11 months later. So those three men drowned, and then a little less than a year later, he died. His big nose just goosh exploded, I bet.
Oh, that was a dude that was not on the ship
Did
but
have
died
a dedicated
still.
suite held for him that he canceled before sailing, and then after it sailed, he died 11 months later.
So this dude was not on the ship but still died after.
Those three men drowned, and then a little
he
less than a
canceled
year
his
later,
tickets.
he died. His big nose just goosh exploded, I bet. I think that thing probably blew up. Goosh!
Exactly.
She doesn't like it whenever I make fun of people's faces and things they can't control. Frankie, I'm sorry. JP Morgan did have a massive, disgusting nose. Something was seriously wrong with him. I think he was just so evil and had so much money that
Oh,
a
this news
disgusting
was
nose.
actually huge, man. What the fuck, man?
Seriously
What
wrong
the
with
fuck?
him. I think he was just so evil and had so
Like
much
in the
money that it
comic.
just like
Monopoly, actually.
it just
He
eroded
looks like
through his skin.
Monopoly.
You don't see really many hot rich people. Why? Why not? I was going to joke about being the first, but I'm too stupid and also ugly. I'll be the first. 20 months after old Jimmy Pepper's cancellation, that's JP Morgan's real name, by the way, a law he had spent his life lobbying for was signed. It was drafted in large part by a senior partner inside his own firm. If the Titanic didn't kill three Fed opponents to then pass the law, what
Should I speedrun this? It took many months okay, no, I fucked up. It took many months and nearly straight party line voting, but December 23, 1913, the Senate passed the President Wilson citing the Federal Reserve Act and some bank evident during finish. Coalesce Bank failed and credit evaporated because the federal government lacked the tools to respond. It had to depend on the private banks such as to provide an infusion to correct the Nelson Aldrich proposed a system that would be run by private bankers, agents, progressive element, they call it surrender to the money trust. And so the banks
his
went
own firm. It's a
bankrupt
tight
and
well.
JB
We gotta go
Morgan
back
was there
2
to help
years
them.
earlier to a private island off the coast of Georgia. A little island called Jekyll Island. A little while ago, I mentioned the last name Aldrich. He was the central architect of that idea. And before that, Nelson Aldrich was a grocery clerk from Rhode Island who made a fortune consolidating the state's street railways, then selling that network to the New York, New Haven, and Hartford line in 1906. He sold this for more than $5 million, all while on a senator's salary of $5,000 a year. He used that $5 million to buy himself one of the longest running seats in the
Back
United
then,
States
5
Senate.
million
By
were
the
much
way,
more.
in the early 20th century, before the 17th Amendment was passed, you could just buy legislation and just pay people to then become a senator.
Imagine, guys. How much did Real Madrid pay for Cristiano Ronaldo back then? Something like 93 million, right? And here they sold their whole company for 5 million, and it was a huge deal. Imagine how the times or how the bubble changed, man.
I know you can do that
It went
now through
from-
lobbyists and
From 5 million to 100 million for a football player, imagine.
PACs, and there's just a little bit more red tape, but it was just blatant. If you had a lot of money, you could just do that. It was so treasonous. Let's make America great again, like the early 20th century. Anyways, in 1905, the muckraker Lincoln Steffens wrote a piece in McClure's magazine titled Rhode Island, a State for Sale, that paints a very bleak picture of how things were at that time. Inside that piece, Steffens gave Aldrich the nickname the General Manager of the Nation. The next year, Cosmopolitan ran a series called The Treason of the Senate, which I recommend you guys doing a little bit of research on. It's about the whole buying Senate seats thing. It was written by David Graham Phillips, and it is often credited with driving the country to pass the 17th Amendment and elect senators directly. You know, like it just should have been from day one. Somehow wasn't. In 1908, Aldrich
So from the beginning, the senator sees an American robot.
chaired the National Monetary Commission and led an 8-member commission delegation on a 2-month tour of European central banks. The Rothschilds, the Warburgs, the Black-Schroders, the Oppenheim family, the Mendelssohn family, the Goldsmith, the Hirsch, the f***ing Stern, the f***ing Blagelhorn, the f***ing Schlegel. There's so many
What the fuck?
European
They
central
all
banks
sound like
and banking
Pokemon, but-
families. There's a rich history of total control in Europe. And as America kind of started to do its own thing, we
In Europe, well, Americans are Europeans.
adopted that tradition of evil domestically. So in 1908, Aldrich
I think Rubio even said it lately in an interview.
went on a 2-month tour of European central
Americans are Europeans.
banks and learning about the families and so on. He left skeptical of the whole idea of a central bank. He came back a convert. One
Actually, guys, America is built upon Europeans that killed all the Indianers. I don't know how to call them in English. Native people. Like, America is built upon European people that went there, killed everyone, and made it their own. Punkt.
very important factoid that's pretty funny is that Aldrich's daughter, Abby, married John D. Rockefeller Jr. in 1901. And by the time Aldrich got back from Europe, he was the father-in-law of the single richest family in America and one of the oldest money families in Europe. 2 years after the European tour, on the night of November 22nd, 1910, Aldrich summoned 5 men to Hoboken, New Jersey, and put them on his private railroad car heading south.
Wow. This looks like a picture back then in Black Ops 1 or Black Ops 2. Like when you played the fucking campaign and you saw like the evil people.
The 5 men were Arthur Shelton, which was Aldrich's own private secretary, A. Piatt Andrew, the assistant secretary of the Treasury, Henry P. Davidson, a senior partner at J.P. Morgan and the company, Frank Vanderlip, the president of the National City Bank, which would eventually become Citibank, and Paul Warburg of Kuhn Laub, a German-born immigrant who had spent the previous 3 years writing the architectural blueprint for an American central bank. Under a protocol they called the First Name Club, they used only first names the entire trip, so the porters and the clubhouse staff couldn't identify who any of them actually were. And
Okay, we are now 15 minutes of the video. For the people who might be asking what I'm smoking, it's El Patron. That's how the strain is called.
this
Okay,
was a
let's continue.
clandestine trip. They had a cover story that this was a duck hunting trip for all of them. They arrived in Brunswick, Georgia the next morning, where Henry Davidson peeled off to handle the reporters waiting at the stations so the rest could slip past unnoticed. This was a big deal, and there wasn't a lot going on at this time. From Brunswick, they crossed to Jekyll Island, which was a private members club
Why always island, man?
off the coast, whose membership list at the time was often said to hold roughly a sixth of the world's wealth. It was pretty popular. The rich had been liking islands for a very long time. J.P. Morgan himself was a member, and so were several of the Rockefellers. Most of the cottages on the island had no kitchens.
Clubhouse.
Members ate together in the
Jerky
main
Island.
clubhouse. It
Jackie,
was a
oops.
party club island. It was basically Epstein's Island, but in the 20th century. The 5 of these men
that's
and the
what I
6th
said, man.
stayed roughly 9 days working behind closed doors,
Okay, wait.
drafting what would eventually become the Federal Reserve Act. So, to be clear, some bros went on a fake duck hunting trip, used only their first names, and then drafted the documents that would eventually become the Federal Reserve Act, which gives ultimate power over elastic currency and
Okay, guys, let me tell you my night. We had match day. We played as a third team. We played against a first team. We fucked them, easy peasy. Then we drank some beer with the team. We went into a bar. We ordered pizza. We continued drinking beer. I ate my pizza. I finished my beer. And then I came home. Stay hydrated. Let's continue.
to private banks for our system. That seems like even more of a fucking conspiracy, but that's just real. Also, they lied about the meeting for 20 years after it happened. BC Forbes broke a version of the story in Leslie's Weekly in 1916, and it was waved off at the time as a yarn, which is what people in the early 1900s called conspiracy theories. The story held until 1930 when Aldrich's
Yarn.
authorized biographer documented the meeting in detail. Warburg's own 2-volume book came out the same year and confirmed it, and then in February of 1935, 24 years after the trip, Frank Vanderlip published a memoir piece in the Saturday Evening Post, later reprinted in his full memoir called From Farm Boy to Financier. Vanderlip said, "I was as secretive indeed
A little
as
bit
furtive
like J.D. Vance.
as any conspirator. Our secret expedition to Jekyll Island was the occasion of the actual conception of what eventually became the Federal Reserving System." That is literally what he said. That's crazy. And by the way, that was the president of National City Bank using the word conspirator about himself in a national magazine to describe the meeting where these 6 men
These
wrote the law
motherfuckers.
that literally governs all of our money. Nobody put him under oath. He's just a guy selling magazines who had a lot of money. Now back in time to just after they wrote all this stuff. While
Back
the
then-
ink was drying,
Back then, the magazines were like the news nowadays. They were just super powerful. Like the stuff that people read were like nowadays, or not even nowadays, like 10 years ago, the news. Nowadays, the news are a little bit smaller. It's more like what's on the internet.
a University of Chicago economist named J. Lawrence Laughlin ran something called the National Citizens League, which was a grassroots campaign for central banking reform funded with roughly $5 million of bank money. So, astroturfing, very common now, very common then. Run money through an academic, you sell it to the country as a citizens movement. You know what y'all fellers need? Less control over your money, and also less freedom, and also just less ability to self-determine. All right? Who's paying me to say this? Nobody. I'm a simple science guy. I've got a magnifying glass. and stuff. That's basically what happened. Now, they were very powerful at this time. They had the plan, but they still couldn't just control the government. They didn't have that executive
I
power.
like the music.
So they needed the country
I
to ask for
didn't
it.
really
And luckily, the country had
register it
already
was-
asked for it 3 years earlier, the last time the banking system nearly took itself out. Let's talk about the panic of 1907. A speculator named Otto Heinz tried to corner the stock of United Copper. The corner failed. The stock fell from $60 a share to 10 in 2 days. Heinz' brother was on
16 to 10. Oh my god.
the board of a Manhattan institution called the Knickerbocker Trust. Knickerbocker was the third largest trust in New York City. Its president, a man by the name of Charles Barney, was tied to the Heinz brothers and was forced out by his board on October 21st that year. The next day, the trust's depositors lined up outside the building and pulled $8 million out in 3 hours before Knickerbocker suspended operations. New York was about to go down, man. Very bad stuff. Charles Barney asked JP Morgan for a personal meeting. JP Morgan refused. 12 days later, on November 14th, 1907, Barney shot himself in the head. By that
No,
point,
Barney!
the panic had spread and Morgan had moved the fight
What pet? What has spread? Well,
to his own library on 36th Street in Manhattan. Saturday, November 2nd, the clearinghouse banks in one room, which was the East Room, and the trust companies in the other, the West Room, by 3
I think he said panic, but I understood pandemic. Hashtag Hunter.
in the morning, roughly 120 bank and trust presidents were in the building. Morgan had locked the front doors and put the key in his pocket. At about 4:45 a.m., the unofficial leader of the trust companies signed a pledge committing $25 million to stop this insane run. One private banker using his own personal library and the threat of, let's say, a locked door, became the de facto central bank of the United States. And
I don't know why, but somehow right now I got the feeling of a horror movie. Right, let me turn off my lights to make it a little bit more. Turn off the lights.
led to that panic. So, it was kind of a 9/11, and the Federal Reserve Act was kind of like a Patriot Act. Is that a bit of a reach? Yes, it is an insane reach. But you manufacture the disease to sell the cure. Okay? That's what happens, all right? There are plenty of people that believe the
You manufacture.
1907 Reserve Act was kind of like a Patriot Act. Is that a bit of a reach? Yes, it is an insane reach. But you manufacture the disease to sell the
You manufacture the disease.
cure. Okay? That's what happens, all right? There are plenty of the disease to sell the cure.
To sell the
Okay?
cure.
That
Yeah, that's what always happens. Hashtag Corona.
That's what happens, all right? There are plenty of people that believe the 1907 panic was engineered by the banking class that would later meet on Jekyll Island and architect the Federal Reserve. Is there evidence of them engineering it? Not really. Is there evidence of them exploiting it once it happened? Oh yeah, there's a shitload, okay? They really took advantage of that shit. The Jekyll Island group didn't really need to cause the panic. They needed to have it happen, and they needed the country to ask them for a fix. They needed to create the disease, to manufacture the cure and sell it, or whatever the horrible analogies. Sounds a lot like 9/11, okay? It doesn't really. But it is though. It's like a way to get people to remove their freedoms.
And why do you compare it with 9/11? Compare it with whatever you want, Corona.
Have more authoritarian control. It's legit. It's pretty based, I think. Fast forward 6 years. Woodrow Wilson. He wins the presidency on progressive reform. He ran against both William Howard
I'm talking about Corona beer.
Taft and Teddy Roosevelt, both of whom had been campaigning against the concentration of financial power for most of the previous decade. Then 2 years later, Woodrow, who ran against the money trust, signs the bill written by the money trust. Amazing. On June 11, 1913, Louis Brandeis, who will join the Supreme Court 3 years later, meets with Woodrow Wilson and pushes the bill leftward on one specific point. The Federal Reserve Board, Brandeis argues, has to be staffed by presidential appointees, not private bankers allowed on the board itself. So there's some level of checks and balances there, right? Well, yes, it seems like it. It's not like they're in a world where you can just buy seats in the Senate with money. We can still do that now, though. I mean, like, what the dude? There's nothing different. Nothing has changed. It's just gotten a little bit more complicated.
They're in 1907 right now, right?
William Jennings Bryan will
Yeah, 1910. Ah, 110 years later.
Wilson, Secretary of State and a very progressive guy for the time, he pushed that same line and agreed. That is the political cover. Presidentially appointed board of governors bolted on top of this architecture, the structure that the 6 on Jekyll Island had drafted 3 years earlier. Paul Warburg's.
But guys, to be honest, before it wasn't better. Before 90s, they just slaughtered each other as well, man. It's just the way of humanity.
1930 book laid out the Aldrich Bill, the original one, and the bill that was settled upon by Woodrow Wilson. He laid them side by side. Mechanically, the bills are nearly identical. There are regional reserve banks, there's a pyramid of clearing, elastic currency, lenders of last resort, a check clearing system. All of it is basically the exact same, with some minor caveats in that the president appoints the gods of the money system. So they took the private banking plan, slapped a little government hat on the back of it there, and then passed that shit. The conference committee that was reconciling the House and Senate versions worked through the dead of night on December 22nd, 1913. The Senate vote itself happened the next day on December 23rd. 43 yeses, 25 noes, and 27 senators were paired or absent. Roughly a quarter of the United States Senate had already.
Wait, what? 1913, the Senate adopted the conference report by a vote of. Well, after
left Washington.
even after reading this, I don't really understand what happened there. They voted, then they rushed to the trains, and then someone signed something before.
For Christmas. Classic. And old Woody Wilson signed the bill at 6 p.m. the same day, 2 days before Christmas, with a quarter of the Senate already gone home. It's pretty genius. A great plan, honestly. The day before the Senate vote, sitting Republican congressman from Minnesota named Charles Lindbergh Sr., the father of the famous aviator, Charles Lindbergh, stood up on the House floor and said this while the House version of the bill was being debated in its final form. He said, "This act establishes the most gigantic trust on earth. When the president signs this bill, the invisible government by the
Back then, they all sound like that.
monetary power will be legalized." He also called it the Aldrich Bill in disguise. This guy was
Guys, do I look stoned?
based and red-pilled. That's a sitting member of Congress on the official record telling the chamber the bill they were about to pass was the same bill that they were campaigning against for years, dude. It's so f***ed up. It makes me just want to run around and tug on my wiener or whatever, like monkeys do. It seems really therapeutic, cathartic. Pull on it. So, anyways, after it was signed into law, it ran on gold for the next 50 years. You know, real things that actually have genuine value until one Sunday in 1971 when a president closed a window and money stopped being money. Now, you've definitely heard of the Federal Reserve by now if you're watching this video. A lot of you have probably heard of the gold standard and or money being based on gold. You know, something that's actually real instead of what people talk about now, fiat currency. Fiats. They're little dumb cars that they break all the time. They're pieces of shit. I just kidding. I don't give about cars. I know that there's a difference, but I am stupid though, just so you guys are aware. And I'm going to do my best to explain this in a cohesive, non-misleading way, objectively. So wish me luck, knock on wood. Before we get to the gold standard in 1971, we need to talk about what the dollar actually is. The version you were probably taught in high school is that you deposit $100 in a bank. The bank keeps 10 in the vault and lends the other 90 to someone else.
1000. 100 reserve. 900 loan. Spend 900. $900 to the bank. 90 reserve. 810. 810. Okay.
That 90 gets deposited somewhere else, and then so on.
Let's see him
Your
explain.
money just keeps getting lended out and deposited, and money just creates itself, and fractional reserve banking. If you didn't learn that in school, you may have heard Jeffrey Epstein talk about it.
We have something called fractionalized reserves, which is if you have 1, you can lend out 9. That's the way our system works.
It doesn't seem real, and it seems Jeffrey Epstein talk about it.
He was a teacher, right?
We have something called fractionalized reserves, which is if you have 1, you can lend out 9. We have something called fractionalized reserves, which is if you have 1, you can lend out 9. That's the way our system works.
It doesn't seem real, and it seems crazy, and that's what a lot of people think that banks still do, and they do. But like, there's other ways to do it. It's very complicated, and they do their best to obfuscate the exact methods. In March 2014,
Guys, the balloon is so big. It's the biggest balloon ever. It's the greatest balloon ever built, guys.
the Bank of England, the central bank of the United Kingdom, published a paper in its own quarterly bulletin titled Money Creation in the Modern Economy. On page 14, the authors put 3 sentences in print that contradict the textbook explanation directly. Commercial banks create money in the form of bank deposits by making new loans, rather than banks receiving deposits when households save and then lending them out. Bank lending creates deposits. In normal times, the central bank does not fix the amount of money in circulation, nor is central bank money multiplied up into more loans and deposits. End of quote. That's the central bank of the United Kingdom explaining the way things work in a different way.
Guys, that's like a definition in a way I will
Than what a lot of us are taught. This seems to be what actually happens when you take out a mortgage. The bank doesn't take the money from anywhere. It just types it on paper. You sign the paper for $300,000 on the bank's ledger. 2 entries get typed in at the same time. On the asset side, a new loan receivable for $300,000. That's your promise to pay it back. On the liability side, a new deposit for $300,000 sitting in your account, ready for you to wire to the seller. Both entries are created with the same sort of keystroke. No money's moving in a vault. No other customer savings gets debited. The deposit is just typed into existence from data. There's not really a representation.
Okay. We had 22 minutes in the video. The system that made everything possible. Let's wait for the
It
pointer.
isn't just like this money moves into here and then you can then loan this. It just comes into existence like some kind of quantum bullshit. In also 2014, a German economist named Richard Werner decided to prove this empirically. He walked into a small cooperative bank in rural Bavaria called Reifensbank Wildenberg EG. He took out a 200,000 euro loan with the bank's cooperation and monitored the bank's books in real time as the loan closed. No other account inside or outside the bank was debited for a single cent. The 200,000 euros wasn't somebody else's money. It didn't come from anybody else. It just instantiated on the spot. Werner published it in the International Review of Financial Analysis. It was the first empirical test of a 100-year-old debate on banking. It's just the creation of credit. This has been known for a while. The Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago published a pamphlet on this in 1961, revised it in 1992, and titled it Modern Money Mechanics. It said on the page that the actual process of money creation takes place
Now we are already past WW2.
primarily in banks. Meaning, there's, wait, hold on. Okay, this pamphlet they gave out, by the way, for free for decades, then they just stopped. You can view it on the Internet Archive, but it's no longer available directly from the Fed. It seems like it'd be really scary for everybody to learn that this is how banks work. There's just nothing. There's just literally nothing, dude.
Well, if you don't know that banks work like that, then you have a problem.
It's just a handshake. Wow. So, what happens when a loan gets paid off? Well, the bookkeeping runs in reverse. The loan receivable cancels. The deposit cancels with it, and the money is removed, despawned, if you will. So there is nothing that's real about it, except the only thing that survives as new money in the economy is the interest that the bank.
Oh, I'm sure this dude here, he has no money on the bank, zero money on the bank. He has all in gold or cash at home.
collects. It's so insane. It's genuinely like when I run around pulling on my wiener for a whole day after research. It has to be completely bullshit and wrong. If this is the case, it means the system requires perpetual credit expansion just to service the debt that already exists. So if lending slows enough that more loans are being repaid than originated, our money supply shrinks, which is horrifying. So, the gold standard. For 58 years, this insane mechanism had a leash on it. In July 1944, at a hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, 44 allied nations signed an agreement that pegged the US dollar to gold at 35.
Wait. You saw the countries there. Panama, Peru, Netherlands, also pretty much worldwide.
4 allied nations signed an agreement that pegged the US dollar to gold at $35 an ounce and pegged every
1945, December.
other major currency to the dollar as well. Foreign governments holding dollars could walk into the US Treasury and demand physical gold at that exact fixed rate. And that guarantee was the reason that the dollar became the world's reserve currency. Beautiful. The system held for 27 years. By the late 1960s, the math stopped mathing, as a millennial would say. I apologize. God forgive me. The United States had printed more paper dollars than it had gold to back it. This was from, guess what? Financing the Vietnam War and the Great Society on the printing press. By August 1971, U.S. gold reserves were worth roughly $10 billion, and foreign dollar liabilities were roughly worth $40 billion. 4-1. The week of August 9th, 1970.
Money.
The British ambassador to the United States, a fellow by the name of Earl of Cromer,
Nothing else
walked
to
into the
say
Treasury
about
Department and requested $3 billion in U.S. gold on behalf of the United Kingdom. $3 billion against the reserve of $10 billion. 4 days later, President Tricky Dick flew a small group of advisors to Camp David for the weekend. That was August 13th through August 15th, 1971.
Camp David I had back in fucking school.
Treasury Secretary John Connolly drove the decision, and Connolly had told colleagues, "My philosophy is that all foreigners are out to screw us, and it's our job to screw them first." That's what the leaders of our government at the time said, and that was their motivation for removing the gold standard. Paul Volcker, the Treasury Undersecretary, was fairly reluctant. Arthur Burns, the Fed chair, completely opposed it, and Henry Kissinger, the National Security Advisor, just was not in the room, meaning the decision was made without the National Security Council's weighing in. Sunday night, August 15th, old Tricky Dick went on live television.
I am declared Secretary Connolly to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets.
Temporarily, 55 years ago. Still can't do it. Then later in the same speech, he also just changed what a dollar was.
If you are the overwhelming majority of Americans who buy American-made products in America, your dollar
Whoa, what the fuck is his voice, man? I just
Only
went. I don't know if you saw it in the camera. I went to. I was already dreaming.
just as much tomorrow as it is today.
Which, yes, maybe one day it's different, but the dollar since 1971 has lost roughly 85% of its purchasing power against goods of that same year since he said that. So that's pretty bad. That's 85% loss. So I would say every single person who's been in power since that moment until now should be held responsible, and they shouldn't be able to be reelected. If we have any debt, if money is worth less, you know, that's a stupid, barbaric, primitive way to look at the system. It's so complicated. Well, then bring back tarring and feathering then, at the very least. Let's have some kind of, you know, let's collaborate on something, guys. This shit makes me so mad. It's crazy. It's actually inspiring. I'm making a game right now called Sunday Hunter, and it's like a spiritual successor to Fallout New Vegas. I'm working on my best Todd Howard impression. And it's gonna be awesome. I promise that. And this eroding, blatant evil makes up the entire system that's in the game. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I'm gonna announce it pretty soon, hopefully, and make a YouTube channel. If you guys want to learn more about that game development stuff, you can join the Gump Club, which is like a private Discord server where I try to interact with some folks and I show them behind the scenes progress on the game and stuff. It's pretty cool. We also have a Project Zomboid server as well that we occasionally play on. So on that night, Tricky Dick signed some shit that caused the dollar to become a promise backed by another promise.
It's a game, I guess.
Instead of it being backed by anything at all. That's real.
I'm still
That
waiting
actually
for the
exists.
Epstein
A piece of
connection,
paper
to be
that can
honest.
be exchanged with
I
another
thought this
piece of
is
paper.
going to be
It's a
some Epstein
fugazi.
shit.
I'm not gonna say that shit. I think it's so cringe.
But
when
I
people use
know-
that, but
I know. He just tells me that the banks are corrupt since 100 years.
now I will toot my own horn for a second. This is kind of the YouTube video advertising version of running around tugging on your willy. I have a sour candy company called Sour.gg. And if you've been eating sour candy for the last 30 years, you've been eating red for
Hey guys, check out this sour candies.
our jalapeno lime fruit gummies. Loses. And that's a very oversimplified explanation, by the way. There's a lot more to it. There was a man who figured out this mechanism very early, and he's not on any American textbook lists. A man by the name of Richard Cantillon. From roughly 1680 to 1734, he was an Irish-born, French naturalized banker who made his fortune in the 1720 Mississippi bubble as an insider who got out early, which means when he wrote about how new money moves through an economy, he was writing from the inside of a bubble he had personally cashed out of. Cantillon was murdered in London in 1734. His house was set on fire with his body inside, and the likely arsonist was his own cook. So he was a very liked guy. Cantillon's thesis from his essay was that new money enters the economy through specific hands. The first recipients of new
Where are we going?
money buy goods at old prices before anyone else knows the money is there. The last recipients,
Where are we going?
the wage earners, the retirees, people on fixed income, buy at new prices after inflation has caught up. So inflation is wealth transfer by proximity to the money spigot. So Wall Street is very, very first, and the average person is very, very, very last. Now, we have the modern scale. The Federal Reserve balance sheet in
Nothing new.
2008, before the financial crisis, was roughly $900 bajillion. Post QE3 in 2014, it was roughly $4.5 trillion. Pandemic peak in early 2022 was $8.97 trillion. From March 2020 to May 2022, US billionaires gained $1.71 trillion in combined net worth, per the Institute for Policy Studies tracker. Now, back to the wage side. From 1948 to 1970.
You hear how the music is changing? It's spicing up, man. It's spicing up.
2023, productivity and the pay of a typical worker moved together almost one for one. There's a chart here. From 1973 to 2014, productivity rose 72.2%, and the hourly compensation of production and non-supervisory workers rose at just 9%. The divergence started within 24 months of Nixon's Sunday night speech, guys. The rules of nature that govern every decision we make and everything we touch, not God's nature, but rather the elite's nature and the gods of our systems, their nature, the masters of the universe, their rules. They don't have to be like, oh, you can't have this. They just have rules that exist that create a fairly comfortable life for most people, just comfortable enough to not take up arms and murder and kill and pillage all of them and take everything back. But it's those rules who decide who wins. And it's very complicated. If I wrote the rules, they'd be in crayon. And it'd be really obvious. If I was be like, this looks like you wrote this, so you win, Caleb. And I'd be like, no. Well, it's in crayon and it says, you lose, I win. And it says signed Caleb. And I'd be like, yeah, I mean, that's what I wrote, but it doesn't mean it's for everyone. The royal I. So imagine the economy as a big old dick just pissing out money. Or we can imagine it as a spigot. What does the class closest to the tip of the penis or the spigot actually spend this stolen, literally stolen buying power on? One of the clearest answers the US government ever produced came out of a 1934 Senate investigation that almost nobody remembers, except for me, because I was alive at that time, and I was very observant. April 12th, 1934, Senate Resolution 206. The Senate authorizes the Special Committee of Investigation of the
Now we are back in 1934, 36, man, munitions industry.
munitions industry, chaired by Senator Gerald Nye of North Dakota. There are 93 public hearings held over 2 years, with the junior counsel, a young lawyer named Alger Hiss, who was in this position years before his perjury conviction. So that's some important context. The question is very simple. How did the United States, which had spent 1914 and most of 1915 determined to stay out of a European war, end up in the war in April of 1917? January 7th through the 10th, 1936, J.P. Morgan Jr., much smaller nose, testified under oath. October 1950.
Wait. That other video. Was it also JP Morgan with the big nose?
J.P. Morgan Jr., much smaller nose.
Junior.
January 7th through the 10th, 1936, J.P. Morgan Jr., much smaller nose, testified under oath. October 1915, Morgan's firm arranged a $500 million bond issue for Britain and France, which was the largest foreign loan in Wall Street history at that point. The firm also served as sole purchasing agent for the British government in the United States, handling roughly $3 billion in war material at a 1% commission. Between 1915 and January 1917, American banks lent the Allies in World War I $2.3 billion. They lent Germany $27 million. So $2.3 billion to one side, $27 million to the other side. That's about 85 to 1. So if Britain and France lost the war, the Allied loans would become worthless. April 6, 1917, the United States of America declared war on Germany. That fella Nye said, it would not be fair to say that the House of Morgan took us to war to save their investment in the Allies. But the record of facts makes it altogether fair to say that these bankers were in the heart and center of a system that made our going to war inevitable. And that, unfortunately, is the reality for basically every single modern war that uses any of our money and shit. It is crazy. Now, the conspiracy mindset of this is that bankers caused World War I. The documented version of this is that bankers protected their investment by making sure America entered a war, which is the same exact thing, pretty much. Now, how about we talk about some real evil shit? How about a guy named Smedley
Hey guys, if you can check how much the price, how is it called? Like the military construction in Europe, how is it called? Schmidt? I don't know anymore. But yeah, their boys went also to the moon after all the Ukraine thing.
Butler. He retired from the United States Marine Corps in October of 1931 at the rank of Major General. He was a two-time recipient of the Medal of Honor, and in 1935, he published a piece in a magazine called Common Sense. He said, "I spent 33 years and 4 months in active military service. And during that period, I spent most of my time as a high-class muscle man for
It's pretty hard to follow this right now, but I'm fighting through, guys. I'm fighting through.
big business, for Wall Street and the bankers. I was a racketeer, a gangster for capitalism. I helped purify Nicaragua for the International Banking House of Brown Brothers in 1909 through 1912, and I helped make Honduras right for the American fruit companies in 1903. He expanded that philosophy in the same year in a book called War is a Racket, and inside he said, "I could have given Al Capone a few hints. The best he could do was operate his racket in 3 districts. I operated on 3 candidates." So that's a 2-time Medal of Honor Major General, 4 years after his retirement. Also, the business plot. A bunch of rich wanted to...
He just flexed. He just flexed against, what was it, El Chapo? El Capone.
3 districts. I operated on 3 candidates. So that's a 2-time Medal of Honor Major General, 4 years after his retirement. Also, the business plot. A bunch of rich wanted to basically overthrow our government and instill Smedley Butler as a military dictator. And he said, how about no? How about no on that? So, you got the class closest to the dick, sucking on the piss. All right, and those people, they have families just like everybody else. But if your family has a lot of money, if you're close to the spigot on the dick, you just get more and more and more and more and more money. Not because you're trying to get more and more money, but that's just because how it works. It is as much of a rule of nature as entropy. So how about the dynasties? Let's do the Morgan dynasty first. JP Morgan Sr. died March 30.
Okay, jetzt, now, jetzt. Jetzt reden wir Deutsch. Nein, jetzt reden wir nicht Deutsch. Now, it might get a little bit more interesting again. Like, I don't know, the first 15 minutes were very good. And from 15 to now, it was pretty wishy-washy.
1913. His firm kept operating under his son, JP Morgan Jr., the same man who testified at the committee investigation a few chapters ago. Glass-Steagall forced the firm to split in 1935. The investment side spun off as Morgan Stanley, which was founded by grandson of JP Morgan, the guy who caused the Panic of 1907. Pretty epic. Okay, guys. The commercial side folded into the Morgan Guarantee Trust in 1959. In 2000, JP
Yeah, why are you laughing? I don't know, I'm stoned, bro.
Morgan and Company merged with Chase Manhattan to form JP Morgan Chase, which is, they're the same letterhead today. Fiscal year 2025, JP Morgan Chase holds roughly $4.4 trillion in assets. That is the most valuable known bank on Earth. A fellow by the name of Jamie Dimon has run it since December of 2005, and his 2025 compensation package is $43 million. So not so much a family, but still it's a dynasty, right? There's a direct bloodline of these people connecting back, and they, they're less men, more kings, really. Now the Rockefellers. Supreme Court broke up Standard Oil on May 15, 1911. John D. Rockefeller Sr. held roughly a quarter of the parent company and received a proportional share in each of 34 spinoffs. The shares doubled within months. His net worth went from roughly $300 million before the breakup to $900 million by 1913, which, the antitrust, trying to create fairness in business, made him way more wealthy. On March 31st, 1955, Chase National Bank, founded in 1877, merged with the Bank of Manhattan Company, chartered in 1799 by Aaron Burr to create Chase Manhattan. The Rockefellers were the single largest shareholder block in this organization. David Rockefeller joined Chase in 1946 and served as chairman and CEO from 1969 to 1980. The Council on Foreign Relations was incorporated July 29, 1921. John D. Rockefeller Jr., who was married to the daughter of Mr. Aldrich, he was a founding benefactor. And the Trilateral
Aldrich,
Commission was
Aldrich,
founded in
we
July
had this
1973
name
by
before.
David Rockefeller himself. And in 2002, David Rockefeller published a memoir. And in chapter 27 said this. By the way, Trilateral Commission, a whole nother rabbit hole. Some even believe we are part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists, and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure, one world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty, and I'm proud of it. So he put that in his book, just in case you guys were wondering. You know, Alex Jones is crazy and stuff, but he's been talking about globalism for a long time.
Okay. Okay.
These are the people who want to do it. So I don't trust them. I don't trust them. It's pretty bipartisan to not trust this stuff. I don't think we should trust it, guys. Paul Warburg was briefly part of a dynasty. He took a seat on the first Federal Reserve Board and served as vice chairman until August 1918. His descendants founded S.G. Warburg in London in 1946. The Swiss Bank Corporation bought it in 1995. SBC became UBS. Warburg Pincus, a separate private equity arm, manages over $87 billion as of June 2025. So, you know, loose relation there. So yeah, we mentioned multiple times, by the way, the marriage back from chapter 2, the senator's daughter, Aldrich's daughter, and John D. Rockefeller, they got married.
Yeah,
They had a son,
that's what I said. Aldrich, I know this name. There's something that I
Nelson
remember.
Rockefeller, named after Mr. Aldrich, who served as Vice President of the United States from 1974 to 1977 under Gerald Ford, and their grandson, Jay Rockefeller, served as U.S. Senator from West Virginia from 1985 to 2015. So the Fed Act's Senate sponsors' descendants held the vice presidency and a Senate seat across the next century. Big win. So there is a secret cabal, and they're all a part of it. It's their own words.
Stay with me.
Sad, bro. This is a sad video, man. It's really bleak. What are you supposed to do? If you just have a normal job, how do you look at life? How do you look at life? I'm extremely fortunate. And that I got really lucky with YouTube, and I've been able to, you know, pour my heart and soul into things that I love, and so I'm just completely detached from reality, in all honesty. So, like, what am I supposed to say? Oh man, it sucks. But like, how do I help? How do you actually do stuff? I don't think you really can. Anyways, March 16th, 2008, JP Morgan acquires Bear Stearns at $2 a share. The total price is $240 million chump change. It was later revised to $10 a share after the Bear board balked. Oh, wow. Good job, guys. The Federal Reserve absorbed $30 billion in toxic Bear assets to make the deal go through. September 25th, 2008, JP Morgan buys Washington Mutual's banking operations from the FDIC for $1.836 billion after WAMU failed. Shareholders are wiped out. Jamie Dimon walked out of 2008 with Bear Stearns and WAMU on his balance sheet, both acquired at fire sale prices with federal backstops, dude. TARP was $700 billion, authorized in October 2008, and the Fed added trillions in fresh.
So we as a central bank, we have the ability to create money digitally, and we do that by buying.
Sense, but Epstein, talk about him all the time. He told people he managed money for billionaires. He looks like an access agent, an Israeli access agent. That's what a lot of people say. Les Wexner, founder of L Brands, gave Epstein full power of attorney in July 1991 over his
That's not called
finances, real estate, taxes, and charitable giving. The 9 East 71st Street townhouse in Manhattan, bought by Wexner's company in 1989 for $13.2 million, was transferred in 1998 to an Epstein-controlled entity against a $10 million promissory note. August 7th, 2019, 3 days before Epstein's death, Wexner wrote a letter to his family's YLK charitable fund. The letter said,
We discovered that he had misappropriated vast sums of money from me and my family.
Wexner publicly disclosed $46 million returned, but internal memos put the real figure closer to $100 million. And there's Leon Black. On January 25th, 2021, the law firm Deckert, commissioned by Apollo Global's management board, published an independent report that between 2012 and 2017, Leon Black paid Jeffrey Epstein $158 million in installments for tax and estate work. That's bullshit. Apollo Global, by the way, that's Leon Black's company, so he's getting, you know. Poor guy got raked over the coals. Senator Ron Wyden's Finance Committee later published its own findings, and the Black's Epstein-assisted estate structure potentially avoided over $1 billion in gift and real estate tax. Roughly $100 million of the $158 million was paid with no written contract, and Black paid Epstein roughly 30 times what he paid his elite tax advisors. So what did Epstein do for this guy exactly? It had to be some kind of magical spells or something like that. Black resigned as Apollo
Tell me.
CEO and chairman in March 2021, and that guy can suck my dick and balls. JP Morgan Chase banked Jeffrey Epstein from 1998 to August 19, 2013, 15 years. The bank kept him through his 2008 Florida plea deal on state prostitution charges, aka he was a massive pedophile and he just got away scot-free because of all the corruption in Florida. Per the Senate Finance Committee, JP Morgan filed 0 suspicious activity reports on him across that 15-year stretch. Jess Staley, head of the JP Morgan Private Banking, later CEO of Barclays, exchanged over 1,000 emails with Epstein from his JP Morgan account between 2008 and 2012, including while Epstein was incarcerated. These people are all bad. Unsealed filings in USVI versus JP Morgan, Southern District of New York, include a July 2010 email chain that reads, Staley said, "Say hi to Snow White." Epstein said, "What character would you like next?" Staley said, "Beauty and the Beast." Epstein said, "Well, one side is available." Man, it was definitely just money. Man, it was just money. No sex trafficking at all. No evil secret cabal. In June 2023, JP Morgan settled a Jane Doe class action brought by Epstein victims for $290 million. And in September 2023, it settled with the U.S. Virgin Islands for another $75 million, a $365 million loss because of Epstein and their business with him in total. Deutsche Bank took Epstein after JP Morgan dropped him. Its own 2013 onboarding memo flagged the 2008 plea and 17 civil settlements. They still took him anyway. And on July 7th, 2020, the New York Department of Financial Services fined Deutsche Bank $150 million for how it handled the account. This shit is confusing and insane. And these rules are for thee and not for me, alas. Consistency, here we go, guys. In October of 2002, Landon Thomas Jr. profiled Epstein for New York Magazine. Epstein, on the record, said,
Money itself is a derivative of a trust. If we can figure out how termites come together, then we may be able to better understand the underlying principles of market.
it's not really even a conspiracy.
Yeah, so guys, the video was about banks being corrupt and Epstein thriving in it, in a corrupt system with corrupt banks. Ta-da! The like is here already. Check out oompaville. I hope you enjoyed the beginning of the video. And thanks for watching, guys. Leave a like. Maybe check out my main channel. I do gaming, live streams. And yeah. Ciao.